If love was a fairy tale, mine turned into a nightmare. I fought for freedom, but every time I reached for it, the chains tightened. Now I wake up in my husband's house, but I never chose to return. What happened? And why does my skin crawl at the sound of his voice? The scent of freshly cooked jollof rice drifted into my nose, an aroma I once associated with warmth and comfort. But this time, it smelled like deception. My eyes fluttered open, my body stiff and unyielding against the soft mattress. I knew this bed. I knew this room. I was home. My heart started to pound. Number, no, no, no. I had been in the hospital. I was supposed to leave. I was supposed to run. I squeezed my eyes shut, trying to remember the last thing before my world went dark. Deji had stormed out of the hospital, his face twisted in rage after I told him I was leaving. I had called the nurse, requested my discharge, and she had nodded politely before handing me my last dose of medication. Then, nothing. My fingers trembled as I pressed them against my temple. My limbs felt heavy, like they had been drained of life. Could he have paid someone to sedate me? I shuddered at the thought. I forced myself up, my legs wobbling as I staggered toward the door. I needed to call someone. Amanda! I snatched my phone from the nightstand and dialed her number. She picked up on the first ring. Bola, are you okay? What's going on? I swallowed the lump in my throat. Amanda, I don't know what happened. I woke up at home. What? But you were supposed to leave the hospital. How? I don't know, I whispered. I just woke up here. Amanda sucked in a breath. Maybe Deji realized he was wrong. Maybe he wants to change, Bola. I let out a hollow laugh. Change? A man who had nearly killed me multiple times? A man whose hands had left bruises darker than the night? Maybe the baby will change him, Amanda added softly. I flinched at her words. I wanted to believe it. I needed to believe it. Unless, Amanda hesitated, unless he has no milk of human kindness at all. A knock at the door. I turned, and there he was, Deji, the man who had once held my face in his hands and whispered promises of love, the man who had proposed under the shimmering Paris lights, the man who had shattered me piece by piece until I was unrecognizable. And yet, he stood before me, holding flowers. Bola. His voice was soft, almost gentle. I got these for you. I stared at him. He knelt down in front of me. I'm sorry, he said. I know I've hurt you, but please, believe me, I'll do better. As usual, I felt nothing, not anger, not fear, just emptiness. I prepared something for you, he continued. Come with me. I didn't move. He reached out, taking my hand in his, and against my will, I followed. The hallway was lined with red rose petals. The scent of vanilla candles filled the air. I stopped at the doorway of what used to be the guest room. The door swung open. Inside, the walls were painted in soft pastel colors, and a crib sat in the center, adorned with tiny stuffed animals. A large banner hung above it. Welcome home, my love. Tears pricked at my eyes. For the first time in months, a smile crossed my lips. He has changed, I whispered excitedly to Amanda later that night. I told you the baby will change him, she replied, though her voice held an edge of caution. Maybe she was right. Maybe Deji could be different. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months. Deji carried me like a fragile egg, pampered me, made me feel like a queen. He attended antenatal visits with me, played with my growing belly, whispered lullabies to our unborn child. I began to hope. The monster had disappeared. In his place was the man I had fallen in love with. And then the cracks began to show. He would have mood swings, screaming at me, locking himself away for days without eating my food. I told myself it was fine. At least he wasn't hitting me. At least my bruises had healed. At least I could smile again. Amanda's words echoed in my head. He seemed to have changed. But be very careful, dear. The past few months had felt like a dream, an illusion of happiness painted over wounds that had not yet healed. Deji had been different, or so I had allowed myself to believe. He was gentle, present, doting. He played with my belly, whispering sweet nothings to our unborn child. He accompanied me to my antenatal appointments, helped me put my swollen feet up, and even massaged them at night. I was almost convinced, almost. At 36 weeks, my belly stretched like a balloon nearing its limit. Moving around was difficult, but I found solace in the simple things, watching TV in the afternoons, feeling my baby kick against my ribs, humming lullabies I had learned from my mother. That afternoon, I was seated in the living room, my hands resting on my belly, watching a reality show when the front door slammed open with a force that rattled the walls. Deji stormed inside, his eyes wild, his chest heaving like a predator ready to strike. "Where is my wristwatch?" he bellowed, his voice slicing through the air. The rage in his tone made my skin crawl. I sat up slowly, my heart hammering. "You usually keep it on the center table," I said cautiously. "Let's check there." I struggled to rise, wincing at the weight of my belly. I reached for the center table, my fingers barely brushing against the wood. Slap! A blinding pain exploded across my face. The force sent me rolling onto the couch, my vision blurred with unshed tears. My hands instinctively cradled my belly. I gasped, struggling to process what had just happened. My mind screamed at me, "Run! Run! Now!" I scrambled up, my body sluggish but desperate. I stumbled toward the next room, slipping inside and locking the door just as Deji's fist pounded against it. "Bola, open this door!" he screamed. His voice was venom, thick with rage. I pressed my back against the door, my breath coming in short, panicked bursts. My hands trembled as they clutched my belly protectively. "Where is my watch? You think you can play games with me?" His fists slammed against the door, again and again, shaking it on its hinges. It was in that moment that I knew I had married a monster, not a man. A beast in human skin. Amanda had been right all along. "He needs help, Bola. You know that, right? He isn't normal. You can't keep pretending he is." She had pleaded with me before. I had snapped at her, told her to stay out of my marriage. But now, sitting behind a locked door with a psychopath trying to break it down, her words came crashing down on me. They never change. Tears burned down my cheeks. I muffled my cries with my palm, afraid that any sound would set him off even more. Minutes passed. The pounding stopped. Then silence. I must have cried myself to sleep, because when I woke up, the house was eerily quiet. The digital clock on the nightstand blinked 12:07 a.m., midnight. My breath was shallow as I pressed my ear against the door. Nothing. I had to leave. Now I tiptoed across the room, my swollen belly making each step slow and deliberate. Every creak in the wooden floor sounded like a gunshot in the silence. I reached for the doorknob, turning it painfully slow. It opened. The hallway stretched before me, dark and empty. My heartbeat pounded in my ears as I made my way to the front door, inch by inch, breath by breath. Almost there, a single step from freedom. Then crash! A white-hot pain exploded through my waist as Deji slammed the glass center table against me. The sound of shattering glass filled the room as I crumpled to the ground. Pain, agonizing, excruciating pain. I gasped, my hands flying to my belly. Blood, so much blood. I looked up, my vision swimming, and saw Deji standing over me, his chest heaving, his hands clenched into fists, his face twisted into something inhuman. "You thought you could leave me?" His voice was terrifyingly calm. "You're mine, Bola, do you hear me? Mine!" The city of Lagos was alive with the usual chaos that comes with a Friday night. The streets buzzed with the noise of honking cars, the distant laughter of night-goers, and the harsh cries of street vendors trying to make their last sales of the day. But there I was, trapped in the dark, in the throes of excruciating pain, with only my thoughts to keep me company. I had never felt pain like this before. My stomach churned, my limbs shook, and I could barely catch my breath. But through it all, my thoughts were focused on one thing: save my baby. I screamed it again and again, my voice hoarse from the effort. Help me, save my baby. The wetness soaking my clothes made it clear I was bleeding a lot. My hands trembling reached for my stomach, desperately trying to hold on to the life growing inside me. But I could feel myself slipping away inch by inch as the pain grew more intense. And then the world around me seemed to fade away. The harsh hospital lights above dimmed, and the sounds of the siren began to blur into nothingness. My breathing slowed, and for a moment, everything felt surreal. And then something happened. Something I couldn't explain, yet something that felt almost like a release. I saw myself. I was above the chaos, watching from a distance as my body lay motionless, a ghost to my own existence. I could still hear the doctors shouting, see the frantic movement of their hands, but I wasn't really there. Not physically. I wasn't breathing. I wasn't bleeding. I was simply watching. Deji was beside himself, his voice breaking with desperation as he clutched the doctor's feet, begging them to save me. His hands were stained with my blood, but he didn't care. He only wanted me alive. I saw the tears streaming down his face, the weight of his guilt and panic pressing down on him. Please, God, don't take her from me. It was almost too much to bear, seeing him like that in so much pain. He didn't deserve this. None of this was his fault, and yet I had become the victim of a toxic love, one that I had refused to leave for too long. But no matter how much he begged, no matter how much he cried, it wasn't enough. I wasn't coming back. I watched as they rushed me into the operating theater, the cold metal doors sliding shut behind me. The sterile scent of the hospital hit me, and I wanted to scream, to tell them that I wasn't ready to die, that I wasn't ready to leave my son, to leave my daughter, to leave my life. But no one could hear me. No one could see me. I ran after the doctors as they pushed me into the theater, but no matter how fast I ran, no one seemed to notice me. I couldn't even get close enough to speak to anyone. I reached out to a nurse, tried to grab her sleeve, but my hand passed right through her. Was I dead? Was I really just a ghost? Please, I begged, someone help me. But there was no one to answer. The doctors worked frantically, their hands moving like lightning as they tried to stop the bleeding. I could hear the beeping of the monitor, the frantic rush of commands, and the sterile silence that settled over the room. But none of it felt real. None of it mattered. I was slipping away, and no one could bring me back. Suddenly, the door to the other room opened, and I saw my baby, my little girl, being carried in. Her tiny body was limp, lifeless in the neonatologist's arms. I followed them as they rushed her to the resuscitation room. Please, God, don't take her from me, too. They worked tirelessly, giving her oxygen, performing cardiac compressions, doing everything they could to bring her back. But I could see the desperation in their eyes, and it felt like a punch to my gut. I wanted to hold her, to kiss her, to tell her how much I loved her, but I couldn't. I couldn't do anything. Time slowed as I watched them work on her, my heart breaking into pieces. I couldn't feel anything except the overwhelming sense of helplessness. Please, I prayed, save her. Don't let her die. But it was too late. She was gone. Hot, silent tears streamed down my face as I stared at her. She was so beautiful, even in death. Her tiny face, her tiny hands, her delicate features. I would never get to hold her, never get to watch her grow, never get to hear her laugh. It wasn't fair. It wasn't supposed to end like this. And then I felt it. The moment I realized that I too was slipping away. I wasn't dead yet, But I was no longer truly alive either. I could feel myself fading, my essence draining away. The doctors had already begun to stitch me up, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I was gone. The monitor beeped wildly once more. I heard the anesthesiologist shout, "Her blood pressure is through the roof. We're losing her." They tried to shock me back to life again and again, but I couldn't feel it. I couldn't feel anything. My body was just there, helpless. "Wake up," I begged. "Don't give up on me. Please don't give up on me." But it was too late. An hour later, the doctor called it. "Time of death, 6:57 p.m., he said. And that was it. My story was over. But I wasn't ready to leave. I wasn't ready to accept this fate. I watched as they covered me, as they prepared to take my body away. I wasn't even given a chance to say goodbye to my family, to my son, to my parents, to Deji. The funeral was a blur of faces, of whispers, of people pretending to care, but none of it mattered. Deji had already moved on. As soon as I was lowered into the ground, he was in the arms of another woman, a woman who had no idea of the monster she was marrying, a woman who would suffer just like I had. I watched from the silence of my grave as the woman he was with laughed, carefree, oblivious to the pain she was about to endure. And then I realized it was over. He had won. He had taken my life, and now he was moving on. He would never feel the pain I felt. He would never understand the hurt I had endured. I felt the bitter taste of regret on my tongue. Why had I stayed? Why had I believed that things would get better? I should have left him. I should have asked for help. I should have run before it was too late. But now it was too late, and I was nothing but a ghost. But at least I tried. I know I really tried. I sat on my grave, a 26-year-old woman who had lost everything. My life, my love, my future, all gone. And for what? Because I stayed in a toxic relationship? Because I believed in a man who never loved me? Don't make the same mistake I did. Thank you for watching. I value your support. Like, share with your friends, and subscribe for more stories. Thank you. See you in my next story.